based on the facts, of course, and it really designed to help the little guy. And I think that this is one of the things that a lot of people in this room probably feel is important, that journalists in the months ahead, we do need to raise our standards, we do need to be accountable, but we also need to not be muzzled by powerful or by people who don't want real stories to go out there. And I think that Bill Tyson was, in many ways, he was an inspiration, working alongside him, seeing him taking on Irish Nationwide at that time. And if there's one thing I think that Fingers shows, it shows that when you look at all of these different people who tried to take on Michael Fingleton, I think it shows that when you see the entire picture, it was really only the tip of the iceberg. And hopefully it makes it an interesting read. And thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just echo Tom's thanks to all of those people who helped us with the book. I'd also like to thank Fergal for commissioning it, and I'd like to thank Tom for everything that he's done in relation to the book and making it what I think is a really good and valuable read, which I hope people will enjoy. It's funny writing a book about a guy who was in business, when I was hadn't even started going to school. And Michael Fingleton would have, got involved in building societies in the early 1970s. And I would think that I'm something of a veteran in business journalism, having been around for about 20 years. But there's a long history there before you ever started. But I was just thinking about one occasion when I met Michael Fingleton, and it was at the height of the rows between the Irish Independent, through the work that Bill Tyson was doing as personal finance editor, and the Society in relation to small borrowers. And I was the business editor of the Irish Independent at the time, which meant that I was technically sort of responsible for Bill's output in an editor sense, but in reality I could take absolutely no credit whatsoever for what Bill had done. But I was asked to attend a meeting with Michael Fingleton to discuss the coverage, what persistent adversarial, consistent and persistent adversarial coverage that Bill was engaging in as part of his campaign to help small borrowers. So I went into the boardroom and I met Michael Fingleton there. I was accompanied by a senior editorial person from the Irish Independent, our independent newspaper as it was, and basically, to use the euphemism, we had a full and frank exchange of views, which included Michael Fingleton throwing some of Bill Tyson's articles across the boardroom table at me. And it wasn't the first time I had encountered a situation where somebody who's been criticised gathers up all the cuttings, puts them in a file, and just because they've done that, they're convinced that they're in the right and that they can actually just throw them across at you. But it went on for about 2.5 hours, and it was full and frank. And at the end of it, I got into the lift. The boardroom was on, I think, the 7th floor, and I got into the lift with my senior colleague from independent newspapers. And as I pushed the button for the ground floor, I said to him, "Well, how do you think that went?" And he said, "I'll tell you later, I'm getting off at 3. I'm looking for a bloody mortgage off these guys." So I never asked him whether he got it or not. But I suppose on a more serious note, and it was alluded to by Fergal and Tom, there is a very serious tone and undercurrent to the story, despite some of the colour around the characters involved in it. And I think it is extraordinary that, nearly 4.5, 5 years after the financial crash, and €64 billion later to the cost of the citizens, that we still don't have adequate explanations as to what happened and why things went wrong. We have general ideas that mistakes were made and regulation was weak, but I think that people who are being asked to fork out and carry that kind of financial burden deserve more detailed explanations than that. They deserve some accountability, and they also deserve answers to questions that they can make up their own minds then about what was fair and what wasn't fair, and what was part of the zeitgeist and what was something much more sinister than that. And unfortunately we haven't had that. I'd like to think that this book in its own way will contribute to doing two things. One is to provide some of those answers for members of the public who deserve them, and also then to try and encourage and keep a little bit of momentum around the need to have some sort of proper banking inquiry, because if people are being asked to stump up that kind of 30 and 40 year financial burden, they do deserve answers. But thank you very much for coming. Please buy the book and enjoy it. I was going to make fingers crossed it goes well, Joe, but I decided not to. Okay, everybody, that concludes the formalities. Thank you all for coming and enjoy the rest of the evening.